today who is a member, who just recently retired from the OSU libraries as Assistant Director of Special Collections, and also for a number of years as the University Archivist. And it's in this position where he acquired so much knowledge for the book that he's going to talk about and read from today, which is entitled The Ohio State University and Illustrated History. And I don't want to take up much more of your time. I'd like to turn this over to Ray and let him tell you about it himself.
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you. Well, thank you for coming. To commence this read aloud, I'd like to begin by talking a little bit about the purpose, my goals in writing the book, and hopefully if you read the book, you be in a position to assess how well I've met those objectives. First, I wanted to be reasonably comprehensive without being encyclopedic, and so the book does cover from 1862 to 2009. Unlike other histories, in fact, when I began this project, I looked at about 15, 20 recently, about 6 years ago, published histories and didn't like any of them. I wanted a book, I decided that I wanted a book that was more topical in organization. And in fact, that even leads me to my first read aloud. In writing this book, I decided to look at the history of the university as if it were a prison that has many sides. If I were to ask people what aspect of the university is most important to them, I know that I would receive many different answers. Some would say it's the physical environment, the buildings and places on the campus. Certainly we're in a historic room this afternoon. Others would point to its academic life, its teaching and research. Many would argue for the social life, the student experience outside the classroom. No doubt, more than a few, and this was written before the season, would claim that athletics and traditions make the university what it is. If a university has importance in many ways, then its history should reflect its multiple sides and how they came into being. Another objective that I had in the book was that I wanted it to be well illustrated. The university archives, in fact, Michelle Drobick here knows where every photograph is, right, Michelle? Of 1.5 million or so photographs. So I had ample opportunities to illustrate the work, and in fact there are some 300 photographs in this book. I wanted this book to be for the general audience. General audience defined as students, faculty, staff, alumni. The last book that was done, that was a comprehensive history of the university, was published in 1952. Not only was it significantly out of date, but it really is, this is the James Pollard book, History of Ohio State University. It really is more intended as a work of reference than it is as a work that is intended to be read cover to cover. The book has a context. I mentioned the James Pollard. Since the administration of President Howard Beavis, 1940 to 1956, I wasn't here then, there has been an official history of every OSU president. In fact, there's one that's soon to be in press now. That's the history of the Karen Holbrook years by Chris Zacher. But as I said at the beginning, the last one volume, Comprehensive History, was done in 1952. All the ones that have been done about presidential administrations are really bound, if you will, by the length of the administration. Gordon Gee, no doubt, will have there was one written by Malcolm Barraway in the first few years, and no doubt there will be another book about his second administration. So, that being said, I'd like to now do return to the individual chapters. I'll make some remarks about individual chapters, and then I'll do a reading or two from each chapter. Chapter 1 is only one of two that doesn't begin with the present. Most of the chapters begin with the present and then explain the process, the events, the major activities that led to the present. So this one, not surprisingly, is really quite traditional. It begins as it concerns the founding of the university, 1862, which was actually the Morrill Act. We have our charter in 1870, and I ended the chapter in 1878 because that was the year of the first graduation. It was also the year the university changed its name from the Ohio Agricultural and Mechanical College to the Ohio State University. There are a number of themes in that first chapter. One is the controversies. In hindsight, from the perspective of today, it seems remarkable that having a land-grant university could be as controversial as it was in the 1860s and 1870s. Certainly, the Morrill Act itself begged and challenged people about whether there should be a role of the federal government in education. Actually, looking at the electoral process, there are some candidates who continue to stumble about that. It was a highly political, the Morrill Act was a highly political accomplishment. It was only accomplished in 1862 during the Civil War, when the Southern Democrats, who had objected to this intrusion of the federal government into higher education, left, seceded, if you will, and the Republican-dominated Congress passed it, and Abraham Lincoln signed it. That being said, 1862, the university isn't established until 1870. Why so late? Because of a number of controversies. A major one, that's depicted in chapter 1, was whether there was going to be one or more institutions in Ohio. The Morrill Act did not require that there be a special institution in the state to receive the funds of money sold in the West, the Morrill Land Grant Act, to support institutions that had special education in agriculture and engineering. In fact, the Morrill Act basically left it up to the states to decide how they wanted to spend their share of the Morrill Land Grant money. And some institutions dispersed the land grant money amongst several existing institutions. And certainly in Ohio in the 1860s, there were more than 30 institutions of higher education, several of whom were eager to be the recipient of the Morrill Endowment. I'm speaking specifically of Miami University as well as Ohio University. And so there was considerable debate for years as to whether there should be one single institution or multiple. And in fact, it was decided on one institution, and it was the agricultural constituency that insisted that only a new institution could be entrusted with a special mission of agriculture and engineering. Another controversy would be where it would be located. The Canon Act, which accepted the terms of the Morrill Act and is considered our charter document in 1870, simply said that the new institution should be reasonably centrally located without specifying what county. And so there was a competition amongst several counties to be the site of this new university. And of course, Franklin County won out. Each of the counties were expected to bid, if you will, for the privilege of hosting the new institution. Franklin County came up with bond money that could be used to purchase land. I should have mentioned that one of the stipulations of the Morrill Act was that none of the Morrill Act endowment could be used to buy land or to build buildings. So how is this supposed to be accomplished? Well, if you wanted to do this efficiently, one might say, or maybe not cheap, you simply move the Morrill money to another institution. But it was decided here in Ohio that there would be a special institution created, competition amongst counties, and Franklin County was successful in that competition. Another issue was what it should teach and when. The Morrill Act specifically said that while the institutions had to teach engineering, agriculture, and also it was added, military training was added after all this was the Civil War in 1862, that it shouldn't be at the exclusion of other subjects. So the emphasis, the budgetary emphasis, how many faculty do you hire for which program, is a point of controversy for the university. And what particularly is throughout the last half of this chapter is the extraordinary gap between the aspirations of our founders, the ideals, the visions of our founders, and the reality. This was a struggling institution. So with that rather lengthy introduction, let me read from the book. Here's Thomas Mendenhall talking about the first faculty. Then and now it was difficult to generalize about faculty. At the 25th anniversary of the founding, Thomas Mendenhall recalled that they shared a common vision about a new education. As Mendenhall described it, this new education was one in which science should have its share and in which observation and equipment should displace time-honored methods of instruction, not only with scientific subjects, but with all others as well. A small number of American colleges and universities were turning their faces in this direction, including very naturally the newly created institutions which owe their existence to the Land Grant Act of 1862. The men who were chosen to constitute the first faculty of the Ohio Agricultural Mechanical College were already known to be warm advocates of the new education, and their selection was doubtless due in large measure to this fact. They were united in their enthusiasm for the work and an overwhelming determination to win success. So it was not simply, as Mendenhall said, it was not simply that this was a new program. This is a new way of education, one that was based much more on observation and experimentation than simply rote memory, which had been characteristic of traditional classical institutions. Continuing in this chapter, and I did like to quote as much as I could from others. The inaugurational address of President Edward Orton was too lengthy to quote as a whole. It's a remarkable work. Edward Orton not only was president, but he was also a geologist. And let me read the portion. The inauguration of President Orton did not take place until January 8, 1874, more than 3 months after classes began, and the setting was the Ohio Senate Chamber, not University Hall. Edward Orton presented his views on the educational objectives of the new college. In doing so, Orton voiced themes that would continue as leitmotifs into the present. One was the goal to provide access to higher education for many at a time when tuition at private colleges made it inaccessible to all but the wealthy few. As he put it, quote, to the mass of the industrial classes of the state, by industrial he really meant anybody who worked for a living. The privileges of Harvard, Yale, or Vassar are practically as inaccessible as those of Cambridge or Heidelberg. Another theme of his address was the breadth of educational opportunity. In Orton's words, quote, the farmer's or mechanic's son is not obliged to sign away his liberty when he enters the doors of this institution. If, when he comes to himself under the genial influences of culture, he finds capacity and aptitude for serving the world best in law, theology, or medicine, he is violating no obligation, exposed or implied, by using the discipline and knowledge here attained as an equipment for any one of these professions. In other words, the son of a cobbler doesn't have to remain the son of a cobbler. Finally, Orton voiced the views of his faculty that education at the new land-grant institution would be different, stressing observation and the practical application of knowledge. Rather than rely on memory and reading alone, this confers, of course, what Mendenhall said, the student must be brought face to face as possible with the facts and principles with which he deals. His own eye must see and not others. In contrast to the traditional teaching that depended upon memory and mental drill, Orton declared that land-grant colleges must teach, quote, in a truly scientific way, by induction, by experiment, instead of the dogmatic method which so largely prevailed hitherto. In fact, Orton would refer in this inaugural address to the moral land grant being the beginning of a new epoch. And he would, again, the geologist coming up at him would say that even as sometimes fossils help geologists identify different eras, so anthropologists in the future, or historians in the future, would see the land grant as a new epoch in the history of higher education in the United States.